All right. Hello, guys. This is the College Dinner Table podcast. This is the first episode of it. So I'm really, really excited. Basically, this is a podcast where we, as college students, are talking about things we see going on in the world and specifically at our university, Belmont University. It was originally called Belmont Dinner Table, but I changed it to College Dinner Table just because there's other universities in Nashville, first of all, but also I don't want this to seem like this is indicative of anything that Belmont believes. Everything that you see here is my own viewpoint and the viewpoints of anyone who I have on. My name is Nicholas, so I'll be the host and moderator asking questions. And joining me today, I have two wonderful guests. So I'll let them introduce themselves and then we'll get started. So who wants to go first?
I would say Belmont University pretty successfully implements Christian beliefs and ideals. It can be seen in like our everyday experience at Belmont, like their whole mission statement, including a Christ-like, centered view, while also preaching diversity and inclusivity, which I just think is a contradiction. Because if you're promoting Christian values and religion, and then saying that you also foster this diversity of belief, it's like, do you? Same with the Christian values and policies around, like, it's a dry campus, no alcohol, no drugs. That's rooted in Christianity and conservatism. Same with visitation and co-ed rules. That's very conservative Christian ideas of trying to protect the students from not having sexual relations and things like that, purity culture type thing, like all that. And then the same with LGBTQIA stuff on campus. Many well cores and chapels have talked about this stuff in a bad light, which is usually being taught by either a guest who is Christian or a teacher who is either Christian or has been hired on the notion that they do follow Belmont's Christian values, which every single teacher who is hired by Belmont has to have, agree with Belmont's core Christian beliefs. So, and another thing is, I think that even though Belmont is a small school, if we look at Vanderbilt or even a bigger school like MTSU or UTK, they have little to no mention of influence of Christian faith on campus. Like there might be some clubs, some churches around, but they do not require classes. They don't have these well core. They don't have these oppressive things with ignoring the gay students on campus and queer students. And I think it's kind of as I've been questioning more my faith, I think it's very clear that you can kind of spot those who might be questioning their faith on campus or who might not be Christian. It can be very noticeable since there are a lot of conservative values concerning, style, outward style and appearance, or having the gay flag on your backpack or computer. I have one on a sticker on my computer, and it feels very isolating sometimes. So that's why I think that Belmont has been very successful without openly saying, hey, we are only a Christian community. I think they've done everything but say that at this point. So yeah.
Yeah, so real quick, Jack, before I do want you to respond, but just real quick for context, because I know not everybody watching this goes to Belmont necessarily. As Belmont students, in order to graduate, you have to take 2 theology courses at least, 2 semester-long theology courses. And so, well, I transferred here, so I only had to take 1 from Belmont's, but where I transferred from was also a Christian school, so I took a theology course there, and then here I took Understanding the Bible. And you also have to attend a certain number of events that are called well core events, which may include attending a church service or a speaker who is explaining how religion. Sorry, something popped up. But anyways, yeah, something about how religion has affected their life or something like that. So just for context, if you don't go to Belmont, that's partially what Claire means when she says that, Belmont is sort of in some ways prioritizing Christianity, even though it claims to be accepting of everybody else. But yeah, we'll talk more about that. Anyways, Jaq, is there anything you
I
wanted
had
to
one
say?
more thing really quick.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just for like a personal thing to say that my minor is global leadership studies. So when you think of that, do you think of like Christian classes? And like, like you think more of like foreign policy and things like that and helping people, dealing with other people's governments. And the requirements for my minor is to take basically 3 more religion classes, Christian doctrine, Christian ethics, and 1 more class, which usually the majority of classes at Belmont have to do with something with the Bible, at least in political science. But I just wanted to add that because it's been really weird. Like, I feel like I'm just learning more about the Bible when I'm like, well, I chose this because I want to help people of other cultures. But yeah.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful context, because obviously the Bible is important everywhere, but yeah, that definitely surprises me. I did not know that. So anyways, Jaq, did you want to say anything about Belmont calling itself Christian? Or
yeah, I think like I guess it's self-identified as Christian. So rather than really argue about like whether or not it's Christian, maybe it would be better to try to make a point about whether or not it's a good Christian university or a bad Christian university, or what ways it could be better and what ways it is better than average, and letting in enough space for the nuance there. But I think, it's definitely secular in a lot of ways with kind of a Christian flavor. I was looking at actually a lot of more conservative universities, and I chose Belmont because it has a lot of different opportunities that some of those other universities didn't. And I just generally think that the Christian faculty here are a mixed bag, like any group of Christians you'll get. And I think the administration are probably decent people. I don't agree with a lot of the decisions that they make. And a lot of my disagreements come from Christian beliefs that I have. And a lot of the decisions they have probably come from Christian beliefs they have that are different beliefs than mine. So part of it is like, maybe we shouldn't be haggling over whether or not it's Christian, but we should definitely be taking a look at what values are materially being implemented, aside from the labels. So, I think it has a big history of making relatively anti-gospel decisions. And I don't think that it was a good idea to spend as long as they did not addressing the legacy of slavery and segregation that has deeply affected Nashville because of Adeline Acklin and her family being extremely wealthy because of slavery and because they ran the most lucrative slavery business in the South, in this region of the South. And other than that, like, I think COVID policies could have been a lot better to disabled students, especially now that the mask mandate has been lifted. I think that from a Christian perspective, we shouldn't be throwing disabled people under the bus. They're people too. And there's hardly any accommodations for them. There have been many stories of disabled people who just haven't been listened to by teachers or administration people. And I could go on. There's many other things, but the question about whether or not it's Christian doesn't interest me as much as like how well does it live into its purported Christian values. And then just the other element of it being a for-profit institution. run by a lot of wealthy donors makes it kind of difficult to think of as embodying all the same values that Jesus discussed, in the sense that I think that sometimes money can get in the way of making ethical decisions, or at least moral decisions. So yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, I think that the question of is it Christian or not is kind of mute, because it is Christian. That's just where I am with that, because I mean their entire mission statement has the word Christian like right there at the front. Dr. Jones actually altered it this last year with specifically addressing the Christian faith.
My name is Jaq. I'm a faith and social justice major, and I'm a freshman. I'm still learning. I'm not an expert, but I am looking forward to see where this podcast goes and who it can reach. I have known both Nicholas and Claire for a little bit, but my most recent activities have been with a group that's not affiliated with Belmont called BOLTS, which is Belmont Organization for Liberation and Transformative Solidarity. So that's kind of where I'm coming from here.
Hi, my name is Claire. I'm also a student at Belmont, and I'm not an expert either. I'm still learning. And I just thought that this would be a really fun opportunity. I'm mostly involved with college Democrats on campus, and I'm also a part of the Bolts Caucus with Jaq. And I just thought that this would be really fun, and I hope everyone enjoys.
Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, so just a reminder, that's right, we're not experts. We're just college students who wanted to get involved with this and want more information to come to our beliefs. So that's the purpose of this. It's not necessarily to always come to the right answer, but try to learn essentially how to argue and form our opinions in a more productive way. So with that out of the way, the first topic that I wanted to talk about and that you guys volunteered for is about religion in society. Now, personally, I'm an agnostic atheist, so I don't believe in God. I'm not religious, or I don't follow any particular religion. And yet I see religion just kind of everywhere. So, especially in Nashville, there's church pretty much on every street corner. There's even a mosque not too far from here, I believe. So, I just see religion in movies too, and in music and just everyday life. So it's definitely all pervasive, I'll say. And so being able to talk about religion's effect on society, I think offers a lot of fruitful discussion, hopefully. So if you guys want to maybe give just a brief overview of your religious beliefs, not necessarily too in depth, because I don't want to get into a tangent conversation, but just really briefly, what are your religious views?
Okay, so I am a Christian. That's about as in depth I could go with that. I'm technically a Methodist since I was confirmed when I was younger. I went through the whole process. I'm currently questioning because there's just been a lot of questions that I can't answer recently, and even professors at Belmont can't seem to answer. So it's kind of shaking my faith, my beliefs. So, but I do think that Jesus was a real person, and I think that what I'm going to be basing my arguments or comments on today is Christianity, because I do not have much experience in any other religion, and I don't want to misrepresent that in any way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was raised Evangelical Covenant for a good deal of my life. And now I would probably identify as a non-denominational Protestant. I have gone through a period of, and I'm still going through a period of religious deconstruction and reconstruction, as a lot of people will do over the course of their lives. It's perfectly normal, perfectly natural. And More recently, I've also been getting in touch with more academic streams of Christianity. I still subscribe to the evangelical quadrilateral of, like crucicentrism, the cross being the center, biblicism, like the Bible is really important, and all of those other things. And I also really care about emphasizing like the upside down kingdom of heaven, and the prophetic stream of Christianity as opposed to Constantinian Christianity that Cornel West talks about quite a bit. And also, I'm very interested in liberation theology, queer theology, feminist theology, and Christian anarchism. I believe Jesus was a person of color living in Roman occupied Palestine, and he gave out free healthcare and food. He told the rich to redistribute their wealth with a riot in a temple. So like, I tend to not always fit in conservative religious spaces, but I have my differences with progressive Christians as well. So I just hope to be of help here.
Yeah, all right, that's a great start. So I don't know if there's anything in particular you guys wanted to argue for. Claire, I guess we'll start with you because ladies first. But I don't know, is there anything that I sent you guys some questions before we began here, but is there anything besides those that maybe you wanted to make clear before we get really deep into it? Or is there anything else that maybe you thought of that I didn't ask? Or
Yeah, I think one thing I'd want to add before we kind of get into the questions is that I think that if you are Christian, it is your purpose to love everyone, no matter their gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, whatever. Like, so that's what I'm going to base most of my arguments on, trying to be inclusive and a loving Christian. So that's like my basis of everything I believe. So that's just what I wanted to add to kind of our questions. Like, we're inclusive. I'm going to be talking about different experiences, like the LGBTQIA experience, the woman's experience, etc.
all right, Jack, what about you? Is there anything that we should just get out of the way before it gets really deep into the weeds? Or
I would just emphasize once again, like, I consider myself a work in progress. I consider my journey ongoing. So if I'm presented with other ideas, I'm open to taking a look at them. And I don't particularly feel married to every single position that I think I would like to bring up over the course of this. However, I also do care a lot about Christian values like justice and love, just like Claire. So I think those kinds of points are really important to like have as a frame of reference for me.
okay, well, maybe that's a good place to start, the justice and love. I know at least at some point in this document that I sent you guys, one of the things that I asked was basically religion's positive effects on society. So historically, religion has been used as a sort of motivator to bring communities together and build schools and hospitals and universities. And Belmont itself is a Christian university, or at least it calls itself that. I know some of you guys are not happy with some of their decisions. We can get into that, but yeah, I don't know. Do you guys think that religion is completely positive? Well, maybe not completely positive, but do you think that the world is better off with religion?
I would say yes, but only in the sense that if you're actually following what you're preaching, that's when it is a good thing. That's when it's a benefit to society and to the people around you. When you're trying to push your own agenda or beliefs or wants in your life by supporting it with religion, I think that's where it goes wrong and that's where it's harmful. We can see that as it's been misused throughout history, especially Christianity with imperialism, colonialism, slavery, things like that. Other than that, when you actually use the teachings in the book from the people, that's when it is a positive influence on most people around you.
All right, Jack, what do you think? Do you think religion is an overall benefit? I know historically there are some points we can look at and it's not pretty, but do you think overall it's a good thing?
I don't think that that's the kind of statement I can make. Like, I don't think I can say religion is all good or all bad. I would also venture to say that I personally go beyond the dictionary definition of a religion, where it's like a set group of people and they meet in a very specific kind of location. They have traditions, they have a holy text, that kind of thing. And I probably wouldn't just look at the quote unquote major world religions when it comes to what religions are. And that's kind of because I feel like religion is one of those basic human instincts in a lot of ways, where we look for stories to guide our understandings of the world. And that doesn't mean that some are not more true than others, but I do think that the degree to which we say certain kinds of people are religious while other kinds of people are not religious might be kind of a false dichotomy. And I think even the people who say they're not religious can be religious in other ways, because everyone builds their life around something. And it's not to say that those people are all wrong, or these people are all right. But I do think that whenever we talk about like other kinds of worldviews, other kinds of ideologies, political ideas, congregations, things like Alcoholics Anonymous, like there's so many things that we don't usually consider just religion. And some of it is because it's less organized in a certain way than others. But I do think that everybody is religious. And religion is a lot broader than a lot of people tend to think.
Yeah, I guess that, oh, sorry.
Sorry.
If you want to respond, I'll let you respond. But
Yeah. I think I see where you're coming from, and like I agree in some sense, but I think that I'll push back a little bit, because the word religion in the sense of the term has this connotation that's been more focused on like actual practicing like historical values, historical text. So yeah, I see where you're coming from. It's like a more broad sense of the word. I just see it more as like it can be a harmful thing as well as a good thing. So I think that the connotations and nuances with the term needs to be addressed as well. But I think I agree with you for the most part that it can be used as like different groups of people not necessarily believing in a god or gods and whatnot. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's one other thing that caught my attention. I've met people who say that everybody is religious in some way, and I've seen plenty of them online explaining what they mean. I guess if you had to, I know it might be kind of a hard word to pin down, but if you had to define religion in some way, because to me, it seems like when people use the word in that sense, that everybody is religious, even people who say they're not religious. To me, that implies it's some sort of guiding life principles or something, like it's synonymous with passion or just maybe morals, and not necessarily the connotative picture of religion that most people hold. Is that accurate, Jack, or is it something different for you?
Yeah, I tend to try to think of, from my perspective, just like my experience. I don't really want, say, my political beliefs and my religious beliefs and what I write in a student, like in a paper, or what I make with my art, or what I say with certain members of my family versus other members of my family. I try to think of that as I'm still the same person, and obviously I'm going to be doing different things in certain contexts, but I do want it to be unified around principles that I carry with me into every space I walk into. So I'd think of a religion as any ideology, faith tradition, set of politics, in the most basic sense of the word, not just with the two-party system, but like any way to mobilize around power, or money, or those kinds of things, or just any worldview in general. So it's something designed to fill in the gaps of our understanding and give us kind of a way of life on both an individual and communal level, something that connects us to people with similar kinds of worldviews. And yeah, as a Christian, this kind of looks like trying to be faithful to what I believe Jesus teaches. And I think like live as unhypocritically as possible, and then accept grace whenever I need it, which is every day. So yeah, I just have to look at things on a regular, I have to reevaluate what I think on a regular basis. And I like what the person, there's this person named Rachel Held Evans, and she's an evangelical commentator who passed away a couple years ago. And one thing that I really like that she says is, or that she has said, is on the days that I believe. And I'm thankful that grace as an idea is part of my faith tradition, because I'm trying to walk on this path, but often I have to ask questions and figure out, oh, I was actually on the wrong path there, or I was going the wrong way there. So yeah, it's one of those things where, just like we said before, it's a work in progress. But I do think that it's important not to think of religion as one static thing. If that's how you want to interact with it, who am I to stop you? But if you are looking for the freedom to interact with religion on a more evolving kind of basis, then I think that shouldn't fall outside of the definition of religion either.
Yeah, I guess my initial reaction is just words don't have any inherent meaning, right? Like it's not like this phonetic sound necessarily has to translate to this idea. So I don't know, when people use religion, for instance, I tend to ask what they mean when they use that word, because if we're using your definition where it's this broader, more dynamic, more prone to change concept, then yeah, I guess it makes more sense to say that everybody is religious. But typically when someone says they're irreligious, like myself, or they don't follow a particular religion, they tend to think of something, I guess, more well established and among millions of people worldwide. Yeah, it's definitely a difficult word to find a definition that makes everybody happy, but you can probably say similar things with any word. So yeah, I thought it was good to sort of understand your guys' perspective a little bit on how you use the word. So, but yeah, I think we can move on a little bit. I wanted to ask, well, we'll start with Belmont and then we can move on to the government. But I wanted to ask you guys about how you think Belmont as a school has implemented religion. Do you think it's done a decent job? Like, do you think it should even call itself a Christian school, even in principle? Or
like the last thing I wanted to say was about how just even not in Bible classes at Belmont, professors will bring up their beliefs on certain issues that have nothing to do with the syllabus or the class, obviously related to Christianity. And it's very uncomfortable. And I feel like if it wasn't an environment where Christians were either promoted or encouraged, then these professors would not have the audacity to just share their random beliefs, especially on masks and gay people. That's the thing I've experienced the most. And lastly, like just Jaq, your comment about kind of the administration, their their actions don't reflect their faith, and they might be good people, but like, they made some bad decisions, how you said. And what I'd say to that is that I agree, but I think that they are Christian because there's so many different types of Christians now. One person can read one verse an absolutely different way than the next person, and I think that happens with you and I, versus probably some of the administration. And I think that their sector of belief in Christianity is like leaning so into conservatism, into kind of Republican ideals nowadays. That's just what I see in the administration, especially concerning health issues in disabled students. I'm gonna actually talk to the dean soon this week and ask for Zoom classes because this is not okay for all the disabled, immunocompromised students. And I feel like that just kind of reflects their faith, how you're saying they've made some bad decisions. And I agree. I think we can do something as a student body to kind of address them and kind of challenge their faith, because I think most of them are Christian. So we can kind of appeal to that sense of Christian love and Christian inclusivity and be like, well, you need to include these people too. So yeah.
Maybe that's a good transition point. The overlap between religion and politics. Yeah, as you guys have said, many people, especially in the southern half of the United States, when you hear that they're Christian, there's a decent likelihood that they're probably also going to be conservative or Republican, at least stereotypically. I don't know what the numbers reflect on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it held up. So I guess that's one thing that I wanted to ask is how much do you guys expect one's religion to overlap with their political beliefs? Because to me, when I hear somebody say that, Republicans align more with their religious values, and I also, like personally, I just don't see religion as justified, but I understand that you guys might have different opinions on that. But when I don't know, when I see that people are basing politics off of religion, it makes sense to me on the one hand, because it is how you see the world. But on the other hand, it feels like you could do more to strengthen the philosophy or the evidence behind it. And this is something that affects other people, right? Practicing religion in your own home in private is not the same as going out and voting for somebody based on those beliefs. And so do you guys think there's a proper balance or between one's religion and how much that should influence their politics? Or
if I could ask a question of you, Nicholas, I know that you can only speak for yourself, but given that you don't adhere to a particular religious tradition and call yourself atheist agnostic, and you mentioned that you don't see religion as justified. Now, without getting into the specifics of why that is, if you did, do you think your opinion on the topic would change, or would you still try to keep religion and politics separate? Because I do think that it's important to try to put ourselves in each other's places a little bit.
That's a good question. So I was religious for the first 17 and a half years of my life. So roughly a couple of years since I deconverted. So I don't know, talking about myself in the past, even back then, I probably would have been very hesitant to make a political decision or vote on someone on the basis of faith alone or on my religion alone. I would have still cared about what does this person want to do? What are their reasons for, doing certain things? What is the evidence behind certain policies? And so obviously I would have, turned to religion, I guess, for some questions. But I think even back then, my main concerns would have been pretty similar. Just what is the evidence and reasoning behind policy X or something like that. Although then again, back then I was still pretty young and not really into politics, but I would assume that's what I would base my decision on. If that makes sense, if that helps.
Yeah, it does a little bit, for sure. Thanks. I appreciate you taking that question. In terms of like religion and politics and how much they should overlap, I definitely, going back to what I said about trying to keep a whole vision of, like a wholeness vision of how religion impacts my life, I definitely tend to believe that even though it's a very human experience to encounter cognitive dissonance between your religious beliefs and how you live them out in any kind of situation, just because many of us have been taught to rigorously question ourselves and constantly interrogate if we're living by certain teachings. So it's hard to unlearn that. But just given the reality that cognitive dissonance impacts us, I would say I definitely do believe that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus is the Son of God. I subscribe to the Apostles' Creed. And when it comes to that truth, I definitely think that religion and politics are really inextricable for me. However, I do not think that it is a Christian thing to use organized state violence to codify biblical law, or how people interact with the Bible and then derive whatever they determine to be biblical law. I think that's a flawed way of approaching the Bible. And usually when people say something's biblical, they are interacting with not just the Bible, they're also interacting with their other worldviews, other lenses. And that could be imperialist ideologies like white supremacy and patriarchy, and capitalism could also affect how we think about things, whether that be the way that it makes us consumers or the way that it makes us workers, or the way that it teaches certain bosses to think about themselves in relation to their employees. Capitalism affects how we look at the world. And so if we're going to look at the Bible, we can't just say, oh, this is what the Bible says. We have to look at all the other things that are informing how we read it. And that's why I don't think we should try to codify biblical law. And I also think we should live in a pluralistic society where it's not just me who makes the rules. So yeah, I guess like one example that you gave us to work with was that of abortion. And I don't have a uterus, so that'll probably make it less interesting for me to say whatever I'm going to say. But I definitely think like we, in the evangelical Christian tradition, don't look at the topic of abortion in the Bible very closely all the time. Numbers 5:11-37 includes a command to take medicinal plants if you're a woman pregnant with an illegitimate child, so that that medicinal plant will cause you to miscarry. And a lot of people don't interact with that verse at all. Many people will throw it to the side and say that's, in the Hebrew Bible, or that's in the Levitical law, that's in the the tradition that many Christians believe is irrelevant, but many Christians do not believe it's irrelevant. And I don't think we should look at any part of the Bible as irrelevant, even if we don't necessarily read it and say, this is exactly what came from the word of God, or this is exactly what came from the mouth of God, or this is something we should apply right now. So we just don't tend to take it as nuanced of an approach when it comes to interpreting the Bible. That being said, I do believe life begins at conception. I just think that the current pro-life movement is not something I should support because it's pretty much only pro-birth. It does not take a look at how to support life in all of its forms. And in addition to that, like, I think the current day anti-abortion movement really just wants to control women's bodies for the most part, and blame the working class for its own poverty. And so when it comes to that, like, I don't see it as a Christian position to criminalize abortion. I mean, we'll have sources linked in the description, but one study from Bierbrack, J et al. Supports the idea that keeping abortion legal makes it happen less frequently. And in addition to that, like, we should be pushing for comprehensive sex education if we really want to avert unplanned pregnancies and things like that. So yeah, I don't think that criminalizing behavior addresses the root cause. And yeah, it's a very fraught conversation, and it's sensitive for a lot of people, but that's how I, as a Christian, approach that kind of issue. I look at not only just what the Bible says, but I also look at the experiences that others have shared with me about how they approach it as people with uteruses or people with the organs that are necessary for that. So I just don't think that Christians can just pull something out of the Bible and then apply that directly to a law.
Yeah, I did bring up abortion as a specific example, just because I know that a lot of people take that very, very seriously, and they should take it very, very seriously. But when they come to a conclusion, I don't know, just based on religion alone, to me that seems a little bit bothersome when determining people's rights. But anyways, there was something that you sent, Jaq, from the Pew Research Center. It's basically roughly the statistics on the religious population in Tennessee. And at one point, one of the graphs was how like 45% of adults in Tennessee see religion as a source of right and wrong. I found that very interesting. That's compared to 41% use common sense as like the main thing, and then 7% use philosophy and reason, and then 4% go to science, and a very small percentage go to something else. And I don't know, like that seems like a very odd distribution to me. I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, do you think that the numbers should be more evenly distributed, or do you think it's good that religion has the highest score there in some ways? Or
I honestly, I haven't lived in Tennessee for the majority of my life, so I can't speak to the population here because I don't know people very well. I will say that coming from Indiana, which was a very red, very evangelical state, it has a similar religious makeup in the sense that evangelicals make up the majority, sorry, of religious people. I would definitely want to ask people more questions, because I think sometimes common sense or reason or religion can just be those kinds of terms where people think they're on the same page, but they might not be. So I don't think it's easy. I don't think it would be easy to make a generalization there. However, I just think that evangelicals in any state in America probably do have a responsibility to live in community, not just with other evangelicals, but with mainline Protestants, with Catholics, with Muslims, with Hindus, with Mormons, with Jehovah's Witnesses, and with many other kinds of religions too. I don't mean to leave anyone out, but we do need to try and live peaceably together. So when it comes to making decisions, yeah, everybody's kind of going to be making decisions based off of their religious beliefs. Even if, in my view, you do not consider yourself explicitly affiliated with a specific religious belief, your beliefs are going to come from somewhere. So is the question, should you use your beliefs to inform how you vote or something like that? or should you use religion to inform how you vote? Whatever the case, when it comes to, if it's the latter, I would say people need to think carefully. They shouldn't just take whatever is said from a pulpit or a specific Bible verse out of context to come up with an idea. But I can't forbid people from using their beliefs to make political choices. So I just hope that we can come out with results that benefit everybody and don't squash any kind of religious minority or non-religious minority into a legal system that marginalizes them.
Yeah, I guess now would be a good time to talk about religion in law, so to speak. Maybe that's not the best way to phrase it, but you both have sent me sources on the Supreme Court in particular, and how they're overwhelming. Well, I guess almost all of them now, all the Supreme Court justices are Christian in some form or another. Yeah, Claire, do you want to say something?
Am I able to answer the last question? Or...
Oh yeah, sure. If there's something you wanted to say, sorry. Before we move on, yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that we need to leave this notion behind that if you're religious or specifically Christian, that you're automatically more sound in your morals and you're more justified in what you think. Because I think a lot of people vote that way, even if they don't really research the person they're voting for. They're like, oh, they're Christian, they must be a good person. They're like me. And I think that's a bit selfish as well. I mean, just saying that someone who might be Muslim who's running, who probably might have similar beliefs to you, you're not going to vote for them because you're not, you just saw the Christian label on someone else. So like being Christian does not equal being a good person. Just how every Christian reads the Bible differently, some Christians can mold each verse to fit what they have grown up with, especially in the South, with prejudices and stuff like that. So I think that if we truly want to uphold like our democracy, who we are as Americans, I think that the biggest thing for me is separation of church and state. We need to that should be our foundation, in my opinion, because the majority of the United States now is not Christian. Many people are leaving the church due to, racism, homophobia, things like that. And I think there's an overlap between I'm going to use my Christian morals to vote and I'm going to vote for them because they're Christian. Because I think, in my opinion, I got my morals not from being Christian. I got it from coming outside of myself and looking at the people around me, especially like 3 or 4 years ago, especially during 2020 with the Black Lives Matter boom, especially in the United States. I had to look outside of myself and be like, actually, does me being Christian even matter to these people? Does me being Christian, is it going to help them at all? Probably not. Me going out there and helping protest is going to help way more than me trying to preach to them and trying to vote for people who may not agree with them, but they're Christian, so I'm going to vote for them. And lastly, I think it's just harmful to vote based on Christianity because not everyone is Christian. That's the biggest thing I have to tell people. Well, everyone's not Christian, so it doesn't really matter what you think on abortion. Sorry. I think there's just this big self-centered individualist society that is fueled by religion and is fueled by wanting to get ahead and wanting to have your beliefs promoted over everyone else's. So
yeah, I guess real quick, you did send me something, Claire, about the founding fathers and how most of them were either deists or Unitarians, and it's like they weren't fundamentalists like we think of them today. They're not evangelicals. They were, you could say they were religious for most of them, but not in the sense that we think of today. It's more like sort of a benign thing.
Yeah, and like people using that notion of them being religious to kind of justify them having a religious Christian influence in the United States is just like so incorrect, because Thomas Jefferson, he was a deist, he was Christian, but he wrote the entire Bible to exclude Jesus's miracles and some of his teachings to fit his own beliefs. And it's like, well, then he wasn't really Christian, was he? Like, he was like creating his own religion. And it's just silly to me how we base that off of it. It's even on our money, with the whole under God, and even in our national anthem and stuff like that. It's like most of them weren't Christian though. Like Alexander Hamilton was not Christian, like George Washington, and like all these people, like they might have said they were Christian or religious, but they owned slaves. They thought women were property, like all this stuff. And it's like, it doesn't really matter what happened like that long ago. It matters who's being affected now. And I just want to like emphasize that I think that like separation of church and state is so important, because not many people are leaning into the Christian faith anymore. But I think it is important to use your Christian morals to like influence how you treat others. But again, Christian morals are coming from the Bible, from Jesus, not from your own influence of the Bible and reading certain verses how you want to read them.
Well, thank you. That was a very detailed answer. Yeah, I do want to move on to, since you brought up church, well, I was going to move on anyways to this topic, but basically the effect of religion on representatives, or in the case of the sources you guys sent me, Supreme Court justices. Yeah, I take it neither of you are really fans of Amy Coney Barrett or any of the conservative justices right now, but I don't know. To me personally, I'm not really concerned about whether a person in Congress or in government is religious. That doesn't really matter to me. What matters is, are they doing their best to look at things through the perspective of what is best for the American people, and not necessarily what's going to promote their own religion. And I know that you guys have looked up some examples of where maybe the United States has failed in that regard pretty recently, actually, like in the last maybe decade or so. So did you guys want to talk about maybe some of those specific instances, or is there anything that like really bothers you that here we are in 2022 and this is what the government has decided is okay?
I would say, in terms of the Supreme Court, I'm not a huge fan of Amy Coney Barrett. I don't necessarily know for sure if she will find the constitutionalist, originalist case for condemning Roe versus Wade. And if she does, one article from the New Yorker suggested that evangelicals and the religious right in general will probably swerve to another avenue for restricting abortion, even if it's outside of legal means, because so many people have kind of gotten radicalized around that issue. And I think one thing that is just important to keep in mind is I don't really care for most Supreme Court justices. Obviously, certain changes had to happen, but it probably shouldn't have had to happen through the Supreme Court, like given segregation or given like voting rights related issues, or the various like lowering voting age and whatever. Like it's really, really exclusive as an institution. It's not very democratic. And the Constitution in general is a very old document that I think should be considerably amended, if not replaced. So when it comes to how we think about making society, we should just remain critical of every justice, regardless of whether or not one politician is in favor of certain people or others. I personally am not a huge fan of many of the decisions and many of the I guess things in general said by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I think that she had many issues as well towards, treating Colin Kaepernick like his protest was not valid and it was disrespectful, and many other kinds of things. So I would just say, like, we have to remain critical if we're to be consistent. And we've got to remain consistent if we're going to be critical. So we shouldn't be willing to make an idol out of any particular figure, especially those with a lot more power than the average person.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I think you're right. We need to, especially even in Congress, we need to criticize every person. They're working for us. That's something I've had to remind myself over and over in the past couple of years. Like, we're not at their will. We kind of are, because I'm not sure if we're actually a democracy anymore, but we can talk about that later, I guess. But like, especially with like Amy Coney Barrett, things like that, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they're not unbiased, which I think that was one of the main reasons why we have a Supreme Court. They might have affiliations, they might not, but they're very influenced now today. And I've found a couple articles that will be linked in the description about like Amy Coney Barrett openly speaking about and publishing articles expressing her extensive beliefs, conservative or not. Like, it doesn't matter. It could be a different Supreme Court justice in this case, but like, in my opinion, I don't think that our justices should be having, like literal blogs of what they believe. Like, that seems a bit contradictory to how the introduction of the Supreme Court was implemented into our nations, because we elected Barrett, who is very conservative, very religious, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but she is bringing her religious ideals into the Supreme Court intentionally, which is not what she was hired to do. And the last thing that I kind of like had in our like little document was I decided to look up all the Supreme Court justices and their religious affiliation. And I thought it was very interesting. And I know we're about to have a new woman, first Black woman, come in, which I'm excited about, but we should also criticize her as well, not just because she is the first Black woman, we shouldn't criticize her. But I looked up all of them. So there's 7, 8, 9 now. We're about to have one new one. But so 2 of them are Jewish and the rest are Catholic or Anglican. One is Catholic/Anglican. But I just think that's very interesting, because if we are a democratic country who is representing everyone, who cares about everyone in our country, we're diverse, we're a melting pot. Wouldn't you think that our Supreme Court would reflect that? Same with our Congress. It's getting more diverse, but certain parties are still majority. The majority is white. We should have Muslim Supreme Court justice. We should have more Jewish Supreme Court justices, more Black Supreme Court justices. Like, it shouldn't just be white Christians, because that's not how our country is reflecting anymore. And if we actually want to make some change, then we should start reflecting our Congress and our Supreme Court, especially our presidency. Even the admin of the presidency should reflect the people if we really are a democracy.
I would push back a little bit, just because I don't think I don't tend to think that society should be organized in a pyramid kind of shape where we have fewer people with more power, and like the vast majority of people with little to no power. And I think obviously voting does some things, but if you live in a gerrymandered area, or if you live in an area that's dealing with uh, electoral college voting, essentially overruling any minority opinion, then, like, for example, if I were to vote for a Democrat or an independent in Indiana in the general presidential election, my vote wouldn't matter because it would essentially be trapped by the electoral college. I don't necessarily think democracy is really democracy if or our system is really a democracy if it essentially tries to put every single thing it can in the way of people making decisions. And I also think that scale is a big problem too in general. Like, this may be one point of disagreement between us, Claire, but I think the government in and of itself is not a bad idea, but there's definitely ways in which I think it can get way too big or way too powerful, or potentially just generally like I think a country of 2.5 or almost 300 million people with one president is just scale that does not really lead to good results typically. So when it comes to political power, I tend to lean more towards the municipal or the regional when it comes to like building local power. So I tend to think that if we have 9 Supreme Court justices, we're going to have probably more than 9 religions. And either we expand the court or we figure out a way to arrange it differently. But the way that it is right now is not going to be able to represent America or reflect American demographics, like you said. So either massive changes would have to happen, or we would have to figure out new ways of doing things beyond the nation state that we currently have.
I mean, I agree, so I'm not really sure what you were disagreeing with, but I think that you said the pyramid, you don't want that. But that's what we have right now. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, our government is mostly white men, white women, and that's a problem in my opinion. I mean, there are more than 9 religions or beliefs, but the problem is now that the majority, more than half of the Supreme Court justices who make our most important controversial decisions are influenced by white privilege, and they're mostly white cultures, mostly white religions, and I think that's a problem. So I agree with you. I think we do need change. I'm not sure if the answer is expanding the Supreme Court or doing something else, but I think something that we can do now is advocate for more diversity, because we can't just flip over the United States in a couple of years, like it's gonna take a while. We're probably gonna be way older when we actually start seeing what we want in this country. So I agree with you. Like, I don't think that what we have now is good. I don't really think that what we have now is democracy, as you said, with the electoral college, gerrymandering, redlining, things like that. It's classist, it's racist, so which influences who is heard in the country, no matter really what population is in that county that is voting. So it's almost like we're an oligarchy at this point. The Republicans who vote in Nashville, they're not really going to be heard, but now they are, because we just redistrict the whole city. So all the people of color are going to be heard less. So I think it's more or less an oligarchy now because our vote ends wherever you live. It ends at the polls. It doesn't really matter if I lived in, I don't know, a little city outside of Atlanta, my vote would not matter. It might matter in Atlanta, but you know the living cost in Atlanta? It's very bad. It's very expensive. So it's like the white rich people who are elected, who are running the government. Is it a democracy? You know? And I think that's highly influenced by some of our conservative religious values, that just the kind of what people built the country on, especially the Constitution. We've amended a lot of things that are mostly, like women not being able to vote, things like that. But I think we do have a long way to go, and I agree with you. Like we have a long way to go. But yeah.
Yeah, these are all great points. Yeah, I know religion, Claire, I know when you sent me your sources, race was sort of a big thing, like the historical overlap between religious privilege or persecution, and then that corresponding more recently to racial discrimination and persecution. I don't know if you want to say another quick word on that, or like, do you think you've said everything you needed to say, or?
Maybe just kind of like our American culture, which is kind of cringe to say, I know. But in the South, our whole our ideals were based on Christianity, whether you be white or black. But I think, or even a person of color, Hispanic, it was highly influenced by Christianity because we talked about this in Christian ethics the other day, but slavery pushed people into Christianity because if you weren't Christian, then you were most likely going to be treated differently by your plantation owner, by your, your captor. So, and I think it's important to see these differences in Christianity because that's what I'm kind of influencing. Like, one might not be right or wrong, but one has definitely contributed to racism and classism and things we still experience today. And I know that Black theology, Black liberation theology, it's all circled, it's entwined. Your political beliefs and your religion are entwined because they had to be for you to be free, for you to be accepted, for you to be seen as somewhat equal, even though they weren't seen as that. So I think that religion has really set up the path for normalizing racism in our country. And it's like, how do we undo that? We start with equity and promoting equality, especially in Nashville. So yeah, I'm not an expert. I have not experienced racism. I'm not trying to speak for any person of color. I'm just trying to use my privilege and my free time to research what my lineage in this country has done to people who do not deserve it. And yeah, I think it's just important to note that.
Right. It's always important to recognize what advantages you may have, even the ones that you may not even realize. So yeah, history has some ugly lessons to take away from it. I do want to turn us back to the present day and talk a little bit more about religious persecution in the modern day. So I know you guys have pointed out that, Christianity in particular and religion more generally seems to, I don't know, be emphasized in some ways by the government. And so I'm wondering, Jaq, I know you sent me a source about what counts as religious discrimination in the workplace. And I found that a very useful guide, or I guess sort of baseline for what to expect as reasonable. So I don't know, if you guys were to attempt to look for someone being discriminated against for religion, what would you look for? Like, is there anything specific? I know it might be kind of hard to abstractly answer this, but do you think that there's a case where it might be obvious to you, but maybe it's not explicitly stated, like, you know, your boss is doing this because of religion and they said so, and, you know, like, do you think there's something you might be able to recognize that? Or
I think that I guess I would want to know what is done in response to religious discrimination, because typically, if people are not discriminated just because they are religious, right? They're discriminated based off of specific religious beliefs. And certain groups in America, coming from various ethnic or national or racial backgrounds, are going to be discriminated against a lot more, even if they're religious. So looking at long histories of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in particular, but obviously that also extends to Native American religions through colonialism that were wiped off the map almost, though they're still here, and we should acknowledge that, like, you know, they're still a valid political presence to be taken seriously. However, it's still one of those things where it's really, to me, less about religious discrimination and more about racial discrimination or ethnic discrimination, the immutable factors that people make those kinds of prejudice decisions around. Because again, like I said before, from my perspective, everyone is religious. So it kind of makes the question of whether or not you can discriminate based off of religion kind of absurd. You shouldn't treat people differently in an unjust way, and you shouldn't break the law to hurt specific groups of people for no reason or any reason, in my opinion. But I think, like, when it comes down to, like, what religious discrimination laws should be trying to protect people from, usually that is best summed up in a more cultural, nebulous kind of space where people get to say, like, oh, I'm not anti-Arab, I'm anti-Islam, or something like that. And it's kind of like, I realize that there are nuanced differences here, and it would be reductive to say tomato, tomato, but what you're doing here is clearly racist, and should be addressed as such, and not, like, we shouldn't just, like, take the bait to recognize that they have a valid concern here or something, whenever clearly what they're doing is racism. So to me, like, it's kind of about cutting through the BS and not erecting more BS that people who are already empowered by the socio-political order we have, specifically white evangelicals and white male evangelicals, straight people, cis people, settlers, all of that, like, those kinds of people are going to be able to use the bullshit we erect, sorry for my language, to further solidify and codify their own power. So why make it about religion? I don't quite buy that. But I can be open to other perspectives there too, because I'm not part of a persecuted religious group. Obviously, there's places in the world where it's not safe to be a Christian, but there's also specifically a need to focus on America right now, given that's the space we're talking about. So just trying to keep that in the forefront.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said. I would also just want to talk about American Christianity, because that's my experience, and I'm not going to try to speak on behalf of people who aren't able to be Christian, because I don't know that experience. But it comes back to the whole issue of, can we have this overlap of religion and politics, religion and law? Because in my opinion, Christians 100% have a level of privilege in the United States. That does not apply to those who are not Christian. We can see this in silly things, such as like people claiming religious persecution when they're asked to told to wear a mask or leave the premises, and they say, "No, I have a religious exemption. This is persecution. I'm being discriminated against." And it's like there's no exemption. Like as Jaq said, cut the bullshit. Like you're bringing your politics into, like, you're hiding behind religion, to try to have this holier than thou justification of you not wanting to do something when in reality it has nothing to do with the Bible or God. It has to do with you not agreeing with the law. Really, furthermore, like, this is not religious discrimination since it has nothing to do with religion. It's just personal preference and misinformation. And I think that we can determine discrimination in America often by outside factors that like perpetuate discrimination, like with xenophobia, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. We can actually see these things happening, whereas most of the time Christians are the oppressors. We don't really have any discrimination in the United States against Christians, but we do with almost every other religion or practice. For example, paganism stuff, witchcraft, things like that. People are very stigmatized against that, and will tell you to leave. You're dressed a certain way, or you're wearing something that offends them, and usually it's the Christians who are doing that, which I think is religious persecution. But yeah, I think it's important to determine whether or not someone is discriminated against due to religious beliefs by analyzing the details of the situation before we just assume they've been wrongly discriminated against.
It's also funny because, well, not funny, but it's also interesting because I agree with the fact that Christians do have a degree of privilege other groups do not. That is irrefutable. However, not all Christians are treated equally by the church or by the state. And that goes into all those other kinds of factors we've discussed already that are intersectional. So it's the kind of thing where, like, depending on if you say God or Dios, or if you come from a Black radical Christian tradition, or you come from Native American Christian, I don't want to say syncretism, but admixture and cultural pluralism. Like, Christians will turn on progressive, like certain kinds of Christians will turn on progressive Christians, or certain kinds of Christians will turn on disabled Christians and forget marginalized people within their churches. So I think that it is a wider stream that we are swimming in that gives us the ability to see more people than we realize as our allies. Because at the end of the day, the system that we already have in the American church only really benefits a specific segment of the American church. So speaking as someone who's far more invested in the church, I'll be honest, than in the country of the United States, I definitely think that it's important to address those kinds of things, both internally and in conjunction with all the other communities we're impacting, who may not be inside our church walls or our church spaces.
Yeah, it's just going back to the main overlap of involving religion and however you read the Bible, which can be incorrect. It is open to interpretation to a certain point, but when you're influence it like how you grew up, then there's the problem, and that's when people involve it with their politics and with how they treat people. And I think that's where it goes wrong, when we have this selfish desire for us to be validated in our politics, when it's like, no, the Bible, the religion that you are subscribing to, believing in, should guide you towards the politics that you think you should believe in based on your religious morals, not the other way around. So I think that's where we go wrong a lot of times.
Yeah, I think the idea of religious exemption to me uh, is a little bit odd in some ways because I watched a great video a little while ago. I think it's by Counter Arguments, I want to say, is the name of the channel on YouTube. And the point that they made was that, you know, it would be very counterintuitive for the founding fathers to say you have to follow the law of the land, but not really if you're religious. Like it's optional for you. It's like that doesn't make sense. That's not going to work out in the long run. And yet today, in some of the other sources you guys sent me, Amy Coney Barrett and other Supreme Court justices have voted for religious exemption on many occasions with regards to, in the case of COVID, there's not really a set limit on how many people can gather in church, and other stuff like that. And so, do you guys think that's fair ever, like for religion to be exempted from legal obligations like that, or do you think that it should be a universal? If it's not okay for everybody else, then it shouldn't be okay for the church or anybody who's religious. Or
Yeah, I think there's a balance though, because like some people can like genuinely need a religious exemption from basic things in life because it actually does go against like what their religion has taught them and what they believe in. But when it comes to like what you said with Christians or even just other religions, we don't have to just focus on the realm of Christianity. When it comes to them like making up things where it's like, no, you don't actually believe that, you're bringing your politics into it and your beliefs into it, then it's like that's harmful. That's not what Christians are actually standing for. That's what you're standing for. So I think if that answers your question.
yeah, I guess my question was more like, I don't know. It seems like your answer was that if people claim that it's for religious reasons, but it's not really for religious reasons, then that's not okay. But what I'm asking is, even if it is for religious reasons, then is it okay? Like even if it's genuinely because it goes against the religion in question, like should they be exempt from certain legal obligations? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd probably still say yes, just because if it is valid, we have this freedom of religion in the United States, and I feel like that might encroach a little bit on it if we're like, no, I don't care what your religion actually believes, this is what you need to do. But I think if we kind of promote less individualism, then maybe like, people wouldn't ask for the religious exemption as much as they do, even if it is valid. But I'd still say yes, since that would probably do a lot more harm than good.
I honestly, I don't think that this is the kind of thing that works beyond a case by case basis. So I don't think it should be applied across the board in the form of a law. I just think that like it's really like, for example, I would claim, probably based off of religious beliefs, an exemption from a military draft if that were to go into effect. Now, should you be allowed to be exempt from the military draft if it's against your beliefs for any particular reason, not specifically just because of your religious beliefs? I don't think it's really the government's business to know the reasons why we do what we do, whether it's religious or not. So like, honestly, it's the kind of thing where like it's just a bad idea to compel people to do certain things in general. When it comes to a private business, I also think that democracy should go into effect when it comes to the workers' ability to make decisions that benefit them. So when it's a private kind of business that decides, we're going to have a prayer or something, and there are some atheists who are employees and want to stand up for their right to be free from a religious persecution of some kind, or maybe that might be putting it a little strongly, but the encroachment of religion into something they did not sign up for, then they should have the right to organize around that. I think that if people are doing things for a malicious reason, we shouldn't just like let it stand just because it's the law. So I don't necessarily think that we can apply it in every single case. But when it comes to what kind of expectations we have for being able to even make laws across the board at such a broad level for certain kinds of situations, then yeah, I don't know. I think we should lean towards humans' ability, or at least right, towards self-rule.
All right. Well, we've been here for an hour and a half already. So if you guys had anything else you wanted to say, otherwise I do have one more question before you leave, just kind of a personal thing. But if there's anything else you guys wanted to say real quick related to this topic.
I would just go back to Belmont, maybe. I think that we as students can start advocating for those who aren't Christian on campus, because I think that population is growing, and I think a lot of them feel isolated because it's a big music school. That's why a lot of people come, and most of them might not be Christian. So I think we need to try to like make a more inclusive community, since even as Christians we are standing behind this wall of inclusivity, but it is a wall. Like we need to kind of just open up and be like, we're not going to try to preach to you, we're not going to try to change what you believe, we just want to make you feel comfortable here. And I think that kind of starts with the administration as well, with the whole mission statement. That's just kind of been bothering me this year, because it is kind of contradictory for all the new students or non-religious students who first words they're reading is Christian inclusion. So yeah.
Yeah, I think generally Belmont as a university could do better by their non-religious students or non-Christian students. I don't think that it necessarily has to be about religion in general. I think that making colleges open to religion is actually not a bad thing. And bringing religion into conversations is not a bad thing. Just as long as it's not going to try to make any particular religion or set of beliefs hegemonic. So like just finding a way to and it doesn't have to be about specific things like salvation, because I know some Christians would probably take umbrage to the idea of a universalist perspective on soteriology, the theology of salvation. So like if we set that aside and just look at treating people like equal people, then I think that's something every religious tradition we'd want to include could get behind. And yeah, I don't know. I just think that we need to lean more towards that generally as a society. I don't think we should compel people towards changing what they believe in their hearts. I don't think that's what most laws, a lot of evangelicals say encroaches on their religious freedom, are trying to do. But we should be trying to include more voices in the conversation and include more voices in the classroom from other cultural perspectives, religious, racial, ethnic, national, etc.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was incredibly, I think it was productive. This whole process too. Like, thank you guys for being here and working hard to gather information and then answering my questions. I know this was a lot of work on your parts, so thank you guys again for showing up and being my first guest. yeah, if there is one more question I wanted to ask that's a little bit more personal. It was about New Year's because I wanted to do this like forever ago, but I guess we can say just for Lent, then I don't know if you guys celebrate Lent, or I don't know if celebrate's the right word even, observe Lent, let's say, but I don't know, is there any goal or any habits that you're trying to achieve or maybe build for yourself?
Maybe rediscover my motivation, because I've lost that this year. Like even just simple things for schoolwork, I'm like, no, actually, I don't care that much, but that's probably something I should look for, trying to find that again.
I would just say, like, I've tried to get more involved in local Nashville politics and Belmont related politics. And so far, I think that's going well. That was one major resolution I had. I'm also a cartoonist, and I make comics. So I'm trying to get more regular with that this season of Lent as well. So yeah, that's just a few of the things.
All right, well, I wish you guys the best of luck with those things. Yeah, I mean, I haven't drawn in a really long time. Like, I used to really like drawing, but lately I've just not been really getting into it. So, yeah, cartoons. Wow, that's amazing. And Claire, I do hope you find your motivation because, yeah, school's important. So, I mean, but yeah, thank you guys again for being here. Um, yeah,
Where
I
can we
don't know what
find
else to
you
say.
guys?
I'm
Where
sorry.
can we find you all? Is there going to be a social media page, or should we shout out our contact or social
So
media?
for this podcast, there is an Instagram page, and this is going up on YouTube. So there will be a YouTube channel. But yeah, if you guys want to say where people can find you, if you're comfortable with that, then by all means, just take a few seconds to let them know.
My Instagram is Claire L. Cole.
I'm at Jack Webb. Open Eyes Comics is the handle, but yeah. And then I'm also on Jack at Jack Webb, one word on Twitter.
All right. Yeah. And this podcast is called CDT, or College Dinner Table. So Instagram will also be CDT. Yeah, student account or something. So yeah, thank you guys again. Yeah.
I think this is going to be great. Good job.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us on. This was a really good experience.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun.